Well, I really enjoyed beginning to reread Redwall again, so I thought I would continue for a bit, but I have to make the print much bigger because I'm getting old and I can't see. Chapter 5. Down in Cavern Hole, the great feast had slackened off. So had a lot of belts. Redwall mice and their guests sat back replete. There were still great quantities of food uneaten. Abbot Mortimer whispered in Friar Hugo's ear, "Friar, I want you to pack up a large sack with food, hazelnuts, cheese, bread, cakes, anything you see fit. Give it to Mrs. Churchmouse, as secretly as you can, without attracting attention. Poverty is an ugly specter when a mousewife has as many mouths to feed as she does. Oh, and be sure that her husband doesn't suspect what you are doing. John Churchmouse may be poor, he is also proud. I fear he might not accept charitable gifts." Hugo nodded knowingly and waddled off to do his abbot's bidding. Cornflower and Matthias had become quite friendly. They were young mice of the same age. Though their temperaments were different, they found something in common, an interest in Tim and Tess, the twin church mice. They had passed a pleasant evening, joking and playing games with the little creatures. Tess had clambered on to Matthias's lap and fallen asleep, whereupon baby Tim did likewise in the velvety fur of Cornflower. She smiled at Matthias as she stroked Tim's small head. "Ah, bless their little paws. Don't they look peaceful?" Matthias nodded in agreement. Colin Vole tittered aloud and remarked rather foolishly, "Ooh, would you look at Matthias and Cornflower there and nursing those two babies like they was an old wedded couple. Well, crumble my bank." Brother Elf reprimanded him sharply. "Here now, you keep a latch on that silly tongue of yours, Colin Vole. Don't you know that some day Matthias will be a Redwall mouse? And don't let me hear you slandering young Cornflower. She's a decent mouse from a good family. Mark my words, Master Vole, I could say a thing or two to your mum and dad. Only last evening I saw you playing catch the bulrush with that young harvest mouse. What was her name now?" Colin Vole blushed until his nose went dry. He flounced off, swishing his tail, muttering about going outside to take the air. Matthias caught a nod and a glance from the abbot. Excusing himself to Cornflower, he deposited the sleeping Tess gently upon his chair and went across to him. "Ah, Matthias, my son, here you are. Did you enjoy my Jubilee feast?" "Yes, thank you, Father," Matthias replied. "Good, good. Now, I was going to ask Brother Elf or Edmund to go on a special errand, but they are no longer young mice, and both look quite weary at this late hour. So I thought I might ask my chief grayling catcher to carry out this special task for me." Matthias could not help standing a bit taller. "Say the word, and I am your mouse, sir." The abbot leaned forward and spoke confidentially. "Do you see the church mouse family? Well, it's such a long way back home for them on foot. Good heavens, and there are so many of them. I thought it would be a splendid idea if you were to drive them home in the Abbey cart, along with any others going that way. Constance Badger would pull the cart, of course, while you could act as guide and bodyguard. Take a good stout staff with you, Matthias." The young mouse needed no second bidding. Drawing himself up to his full height, he saluted in a smart military fashion. "Leave it to me, Father Abbot. Old Constance is a bit slow-thinking. I'll take complete responsibility." The abbot shook with silent laughter as he watched Matthias march off with a soldier-like swagger. Flip, flop, flip, flop, he tripped and fell flat on his tail. "Oh dear, I'll have to get that young mouse some sandals that aren't so big," the abbot said to himself for the second time that day. Well, what a stroke of luck. Fancy Cornflower's family living so close to the church mouse brood. Matthias was only too glad to offer them a lift home. Would Miss Cornflower like to sit next to him? She most certainly would. Cornflower's parents sat inside the cart, her mum helping Mrs. Churchmouse with the little ones, while their dad chatted away with John Churchmouse as they shared a pipe of old broken bracken twist. Friar Hugo came out and dumped a bulky sack next to Mrs. Churchmouse. "Abbot says to thank you for the loan of bowls and tables, ma'am." The fat friar gave her a huge wink. "All comfy back there?" called Matthias. "Right. Off we go, Constance." The big badger trundled the cart away as they called their good nights. She nodded at Methuselah, the ancient gatekeeper mouse. As the cart rolled out into the road, a sliver of golden moon looked down from a star-pierced summer night. Matthias gazed upwards, feeling as if he were slowly turning the silent earth. Peace was all about him. The baby mice inside the cart whimpered fitfully in their small secret dreams. Constance ambled slowly along, as though she were out on a nighttime stroll, pulling no weight at all. The stout ash staff lay forgotten on the footboard. Cornflower dozed against Matthias's shoulder. She could hear the gentle lull of her father's voice and that of John Churchmouse, blending with the hum of nocturnal insects from the meadow and hedges on this balmy summer night. The summer of the late rose. Cornflower turned the words over in her mind, dreamily thinking of the old rambler that bloomed in the Abbey gardens. Normally it was in full red flower by now, but this year, for some unknown reason, it had chosen to flower late. It was covered in dormant young rosebuds, even now, well into June, a thing that happened only infrequently, and usually heralded an extra long hot summer. Old Methuselah could only remember 3 other such summers in his long lifetime. Accordingly, he advised that it be marked on the calendar and in the Abbey chronicles as the summer of the late rose. Cornflower's head sank lower in sleep. The old cart rolled on gently down the long, dusty road. They were now over halfway to the ruined church of St. Ninian, where John Churchmouse lived, as had his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather before him. Matthias had fallen into a deep slumber. Even Constance was unable to stop her eyelids drooping. She went slower and slower. It was as if the little cart and its occupants were caught in the magic spell of an enchanted summer night. Suddenly, and without warning, they were roused by the thunder of hoofs. Nobody could determine which direction the sound was coming from. It seemed to fill the very air about them as it gathered momentum. The ground began trembling with the rumbling noise. Some sixth sense warned Constance to get off the road to a hiding place. The powerful badger gave a mighty heave. Her blunt claws churned the roadside soil as she propelled the cart through a gap in the hawthorn hedge, down to the slope of the ditch, where she dug her paws in, holding the cart still and secure, while John Churchmouse and Cornflower's father jumped out and wedged the wheels firmly with stones. Matthias gasped with shock as a giant horse galloped past, its mane streaming out, eyes rolling in panic. It was towing a hay cart which bounced wildly from side to side. Matthias could see rats among the hay, but these were no ordinary rats. They were huge, ragged rodents, bigger than any he had ever seen. Their heavy tattooed arms waved a variety of weapons: pikes, knives, spears, and long rusty cutlasses. Standing boldly on the black backboard of the hay cart was the biggest, fiercest, most evil-looking rat that ever slunk out of a nightmare. In one claw he grasped a long pole with a ferret's head spiked to it, while in the other was his thick, enormous tail, which he cracked like a whip. Laughing madly and yelling strange curses, he swayed to and fro skillfully as horse and wagon clattered off down the road into the night. As suddenly as they had come, they were gone. Matthias walked out into the road, staff in hand. Stray wisps of hay drifted down behind him. His legs trembled uncontrollably. Constance hauled the Abbey cart back onto the road. Cornflower was helping her mother and Mrs. Churchmouse to calm the little one's tears of fright. Together they stood in the cart tracks amid the settling dust. "Did you see that?" "I saw it, but I don't believe it." "What in heaven was it?" "What in hell, more like. All those rats, such big ones, too. Aye, and that one on the back, he looked like the devil himself." Seeing Matthias still stunned by what had happened, Constance took over the leadership. She wheeled the cart around. "I think we'd best head back for the Abbey," she said firmly. "Father Abbot'll want to know about this straight away." Knowing that the Badger was far more experienced than himself, Matthias assumed the role of second in command. "Right. Cornflower, get in the cart and take charge of the mothers and babies," he said. "Mr. Fieldmouse, Mr. Churchmouse, up front with Constance, please." Silently the men did as ordered. The cart moved off with Matthias positioned on the back, providing a rear guard. The young mouse gripped his staff tightly, his back to his charges, facing down the road in the direction the hay cart had taken. Chapter 6. Fur and Fang. The horse had gotten away safely. It was the hay cart that suffered most damage. Bolting recklessly from side to side down the road, the blinkered animal failed to see the twin stone gateposts on its right. Skidding crazily, the cart smashed into the uprights. There was a loud splintering of shafts as the horse careered onwards, trailing in its wake reins, tracers, and shattered timber. His lightning reflexes serving him well, Clooney leaped clear. He landed cat-like on all fours as the hay cart upended in the roadside ditch, its buckled wheels spinning awkwardly. Feeling braced after his mad ride and the subsequent narrow escape, Clooney strode to the ditch's edge. The distressed cries of those trapped beneath the cart reached his ears. He spat contemptuously, narrowing his one good eye. "Come on! Get out of there, you cringing load of cat's meat! Redtooth, Darkclaw, report to me or I'll have your skulls for skittles." Clooney's two hench-rats pulled themselves from the ditch, shaking their heads dazedly. Crack! Slash! The whip-like tail brought them swiftly to his side. "Three-legged Scratcher dead, Chief. Dead as dirt. The cart crushed him, Chief." "Stupid fools. Serves them right. What about the rest?" "Old Wormtail has lost a paw. Some of the others are really hurt." "Ooh, Wormtail. Another famous book has the name Wormtail in it." Clooney sneered. They'll get over it and suffer worse by the time I'm done with them. They're getting too fat and sluggish, by the tripes. They'd not last 5 minutes in a storm at sea. Come on, you dead and alive ragbags. Get up here and gather round. Ooh, Clooney's voice is a problem for me this trip around. Rats struggled from the ditch in the cart, frantic to obey the harsh command as quickly as possible. They crowded about the undamaged gatepost, which their leader had chosen as a perch. None dared to cry or complain about their hurts. Who could predict what mood the warlord was in? Right! Cock your lugs up and listen to me, Clooney snarled. First, we've got to find out where we've docked. Let's take a bearing on this place. Redtooth held up his claw. The Church of St. Ninian, Chief. It says so on the notice board over yonder. Well, no matter. It'll do as a berth until we find something better. Fangburn, cheese thief. Here, Chief. Scout the area. See if you can find a better lodging for us than this heap of rubble. Trail back to the west. I think we passed a big place on the way. Aye, aye, Chief. Frogblood! Scumnose! Chief? Take 50 soldiers and see if you can round up any rats that know the lie of the land. Get big, strong rats, but bring along weasels, stoats, and ferrets, too. They'll do at a pinch. Mind now, don't stand for arguments. Smash their dens up so they won't have homes to worry about. If they refuse to join up, then kill them there and then. Understood? Ooh. All clear, Chief. Ragear, Mangefur, take 20 rats and forage for supplies. The rest of you, get inside the church. Redtooth, Darkclaw, check the armor. See if there are things about that we can use as weapons. Iron spike railings, there's usually enough of them around a churchyard. Jump to it. Clooney had arrived. Have you noticed how hard the words are in this book? There are so many great words in this book. You might not know all of the meanings, but that's okay. You can still enjoy the book, even without that. Josh, here's Josh again. When he went to college, he used to say quite frequently, I don't understand how people who weren't read to and who didn't become readers, how they do well in college. There's so much reading in college. Josh has a great vocabulary, mostly because of how much he reads. And that started because of reading out loud to him. So, hopefully you are enjoying this book, and whenever I stop, if I don't make it through the end of the book, that you find someone who loves you to continue it. So, let's pick up where we left off. Chapter 7. Matthias had never stayed up all night in his life. He was just a bit tired, but strangely excited. Great events seemed to have been set in motion by his news. Immediately upon being informed of the hay cart incident, the abbot had insisted upon calling a special council meeting of all Redwall creatures. Once again, Cavern Hole was packed to the doors, but this time it was for a purpose very different from the feast. Constance and Matthias stood in front of the council of elders. All about them was a hum of whispers and muttering. Abbot Mortimer called order by ringing a small bell. Pay attention, everyone. Constance and Matthias, would you please tell the council what you saw tonight on the road to St. Ninian's? As clearly as they could, the badger and the young mouse related the incident of the rat-infested hay cart. The council began questioning them. Rats, you say, Matthias? What type of rat? Inquired Sister Clements. Big ones, Matthias replied, though I'm afraid I couldn't say what kind they were or where they had come from. What about you, Constance? Well, I remember that my old granddad once knew a sea rat. Going by his description, I'd say that's what they look like to me. And how many would you say there were of these rats? Father Abbot asked. Couldn't say for sure, Father Abbot. There must have been hundreds. Matthias? Oh, yes, Father. I'd agree with Constance. At least 400. Did you notice anything else about them, Constance? Indeed I did, Father Abbot. My badger senses told me right off that these were very bad and evil rats. The badger's statement caused uproar and shouts of "Nonsense! Pure speculation! That's right! Give a rat a bad name!" Without even thinking, Matthias raised a paw and shouted aloud, "Constance is right. I could feel it myself. There was one huge rat with a ferret's skull on a pole. I got a good look at him. It was like seeing some horrible monster." In the silence that followed, the abbot rose and confronted Matthias. Stooping slightly, he stared into the young mouse's bright eyes. "Think carefully, my son. Was there anything special you noticed about this rat?" Matthias thought for a moment. Everyone was watching him. "He was much bigger than the others, Father." "What else? Think, Matthias." "I remember. He had only one eye." "Right or left?" "Left, I think. Yes, it was the left, Father." "Now, can you tell me anything? Can you recall anything about his tail?" "I certainly can," Matthias squeaked. "It must have been the longest tail of any rat alive. He held it in his claw as if it were a whip." The abbot paced up and down before turning to the assembly. "Twice in my lifetime I have heard travelers speak of this rat. He bears a name that a fox would be afraid to whisper in the darkness of midnight. Clooney the Scourge." A deathly hush fell upon the creatures in Cavern Hole. Clooney the Scourge? Surely not. He was only some kind of folk legend. A warning used by mothers when youngsters were fractious or disobedient. "Go to sleep or Clooney will get you. Eat up your dinner or Clooney will come. Come in this instant or I'll tell Clooney." Most creatures didn't even know what Clooney was. He was just some sort of bogey that lived in bad dreams in the dark corners of imagination. The silence was broken by scornful snorts and derisive laughter. Furry elbows nudged downy ribs. Mice were beginning to smile from sheer relief. Clooney the Scourge, indeed. Feeling slightly abashed, Matthias and Constance looked pleadingly towards the abbot for support. Abbot Mortimer's old face was stern as he shook the bell vigorously for silence. "Mice of Redwall, I see there are those among you who doubt the word of your abbot." The quiet but authoritative words caused an embarrassed shuffling from the council of elders. Brother Joseph stood up and cleared his throat. Good Father Abbot, we all respect your word and look to you for guidance, but really, I mean..." Sister Clement stood up smiling. She spread her paws wide. "Perhaps Clooney is coming to get us for staying up late." A roar of laughter greeted the ironic words. Constance's back hairs bristled. She gave an angry growl, followed by a fierce bark. The mice huddled together with fright. Nobody had ever seen a snarling, angry badger at a council meeting. Before they could recover, Constance was up on her hind legs, having her say, "I've never seen such a pack of empty-headed ninnies. You should all be ashamed of yourselves, giggling like silly little otter cubs that have caught a beetle. I never thought I'd live to see the elders of Redwall acting in this way." Constance hunched her heavy shoulders and glared about with a ferocity that set them trembling. "And you listen to me. Take heed of what your father Abbot has to say. The next creature who utters one squeak will answer to me. Understand?" The badger bowed low in a dignified manner, gesturing with her massive blunt paw. "The floor is yours, Father Abbot." "Thank you, Constance, my good, faithful friend," the abbot murmured. He looked about him, shaking his head gravely. "I have little more to say on the subject, but as I see that you still need convincing, here is my proposal. We will send 2 mice out to relieve the gatehouse. Let me see. Yes, brothers Rufus and George, would you kindly go and take over from brother Methuselah? Please send him in here to me. Tell him to bring the Traveler's record volumes, not the present issue, but the old editions which were used in past years." Rufus and George, both solid-looking, sensible mice, took their leave with a formal bow to the abbot. Through a high slitted window, Matthias could see the rosy pink and golden fingers of dawn stealing down a cavern hole as the candles began to flicker and smoke into stubs. All in the space of a night, events had moved from festivity to a crisis. He, Matthias, had taken a major role in both. First the big grayling, then the sighting of the cart. Large happenings for a small mouse. Old brother Methuselah had kept the Abbey records for as long as any creature could remember. It was his life's work and consuming passion. Besides the official chronicle of Redwall, he also kept his own personal volume, full of valuable information. Traveling creatures, migratory birds, wandering foxes, rambling squirrels, and garrulous hares. They all stopped and chatted with the old mouse, partaking of his hospitality, never dreaming of hurting him in any way. Methuselah had the gift of tongues. He could understand any creature, even a bird. He was an extraordinary old mouse, who lived with the company of his volumes in the solitude of the gatehouse. Seated in the Father Abbot's own chair, Methuselah took his spectacles from a moss-bark case, carefully perching them on the bridge of his nose. All gathered round to hear as he opened a record book and spoke in a squeak barely above a whisper. Hmm, me Lord Abbot Cedric. It is Cedric, isn't it? Oh, botheration. You'll be the new abbot, Mortimer, the one who came after Cedric. Oh, dear me. I see so many of them come and go, you know. Me Lord Abbot Mortimer, and members of Redwall. I refer to a record of winter 6 years back. Here the ancient mouse took a while to leaf through the pages. Yes, here it is. Late in November. Year of the small, sweet chestnut. From a frozen sparrow-hawk, come down from the north. Peculiar chap. Spoke with a strange accent. I repaired his right wing pin-feather. News of a mine disaster, caused by a large savage sea rat with an extraordinary tail. It seems that this rat, Clooney they called him, wanted to settle his army in the mine. The badgers and other creatures who owned the mine drove them out. Clooney returned by night, and with his band of rats gnawed away and undermined much of the wooden shoring. This caused the mine to collapse the next day, killing the owners. Brother Methuselah closed the volume and looked over his glasses at the assembly. I have no need to read further. I can recite other misdeeds from memory. As the hordes of Clooney the Scourge have moved southwards over the past 6 years, I have gathered intelligence of other incidents. A farmhouse set alight later that same year. Piglets, an entire litter of them eaten alive by rats. Sickness and disease spread through livestock herds by Clooney's army. There was even a report brought to me 2 years ago by a town dog. An army of rats stampeded a herd of cows through a village, causing chaos and much destruction. Methuselah halted and blinked over his spectacles. And you dare doubt the word of our abbot that Clooney the Scourge exists? What idiotic mice you are, to be sure. Methuselah's words caused widespread consternation. There was much agitated nibbling of paws. Nobody could doubt he spoke the truth. He was already old and wise, when the most elderly among them was a blind, hairless mite, puling and whimpering for a feed from its mother. Oh, my whiskers, what a mess! Hadn't we better pack and move? Maybe Clooney will spare us. Oh dear, what shall we do? Matthias sprang to the middle of the floor, brandishing his staff in a way that surprised even him. Do, he cried. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll be ready. The abbot could not help shaking his head in admiration. It seemed that young Matthias had hidden depths. Why, thank you, Matthias, he said. I could not have put it better myself. That's exactly what we will do. We'll be ready. Next chapter is chapter 8. It looks like Clooney plays a major role again. Stay tuned for the next installment, or find someone who loves you to read it to you in person.